This is the Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Bruschi and continuing coverage of the case against Bryan Kohberger.
We've all heard the saying, you really never know someone. But what happens when even the people who are trained to know miss it? But how can you be looking if you don't know what to be looking for or don't know the extent of what the problem actually is? Bryan Kohberger wasn't some shadowy figure lurking on the fringes of society. He was a criminology PhD student studying under experts, publishing academic research, walking the halls of academia. And yet, underneath the glasses and the GPA was something far more sinister. A ticking time bomb, wearing a backpack and taking notes in class. And the most jarring part, the people closest to him, professors, peers, even one of the leading experts in serial killer psychology, never saw it coming. You can't really blame them. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on that chilling disconnect. Because now that Kohberger has pled guilty to the horrific murders of 4 students in Idaho, no more speculation, no more courtroom chess match. We are left to ask the harder questions. What exactly was going on in his head? And why did not anyone see it before it exploded? Retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer joins me for a brutally honest breakdown. And we're not just talking about Kohberger's behavior in court or the cold precision of the crime. We're digging deeper into his past, into his isolation, and into the growing, disturbing trend of psychologically fractured young men who don't know how to connect. So they lash out to destroy. While you're watching this or listening to this, in the comment section on YouTube, be sure to let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear them. And if you're not already on YouTube, you're listening on the audio podcast platforms, do check us out on YouTube. Just search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi so you can join us there and let your voice be heard. This isn't just about Bryan Kohberger. It's about the thousands of kids just like him, awkward, angry, ignored, who never make headlines, but simmer under the surface in silence. And when that silence breaks, it can be in the worst way possible. We talk about incel culture, the illusion of early intervention, and what it means when someone can spend their entire life studying serial killers and still miss the one thing sitting in the front row. So here's the question that kicks it all off, the one I asked Jennifer that really set the tone. If one of the world's foremost experts on serial killers, someone who quite literally wrote the book on BTK, couldn't spot Bryan Kohberger, what hope do we have for the rest of us? And I say that in jest somewhat, but Jennifer, I'm going to throw it to you. How do we spot folks like this?
Well, Tony, serial killers and mass killers have been studied since the beginning of murdering, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's books and annals and psychologists who have spent their life's work on that. And I found it very interesting, and I have the utmost respect for Dr. Ramsland, mm-hmm. but very interesting that she was his teacher in 4 classes, 3 undergraduate is my understanding, 1 graduate course, and his counselor throughout. Mm-hmm. And she didn't spot him. Yeah. She herself says that she was completely shocked mm-hmm. and was, quote, duped.
Yeah.
And I think this is a real wake-up call from the aspect of they can be among us, and even if this is what you do for a living and have done for decades, and this is your life's work, and she not only studied serial killers, she studied the serial killer that I think Bryan Kohberger studied and tried to emulate, Dennis Rader, a.k.a. BTK.
Yep.
So she of all people should be the most attuned. Tony, I think it just shows us that you can be walking amongst other people and no one ever knows really what's in a serial killer's mind.
That's really true. I mean, like you said, we've been studying this for all time. What makes people do this? But are we any closer to identifying them before they actually carry something out? And I wonder, as I look at this more and more, and especially as we kind of dig back the layers of Kohberger, especially going back in time, and we will get to his teen years, and we'll get to the visual snow and all that. But I want to go back even a little bit further, because maybe that's where we should be looking more than we should be at necessarily right before they strike. I'm wondering if there should be more attuneness, and I don't have the answers to how you do this, but to children who are going through traumas, to seeing how certain children react to certain traumas, and what goes on in their world as they continue to move their path forward. I mean, as we understand here, Bryan Kohberger was a kid that always was a bit awkward, always just, I think, naturally, I'm going to say probably genetically, had difficulty relating to others, just the way that his brain worked, and went through a lot of hell, ended up losing 150 pounds, apparently his personality changed very dramatically at that point in time. But nobody could say, you're going to be a serial killer someday. But we certainly saw a young man who was very disturbed. And we as a society, when we see that, a lot of times just back away. Hope he gets the help he needs. Maybe, hopefully, who knows? But I'm going to inch my way away from this person because they're icky. They make me uncomfortable. And that ends up putting them in isolation. Not that we should all become best friends with the people who are acting like they could potentially kill others, but there needs to be some attention here, because there's a massive amount of young men in our country who, we get to the incel area that I think you have a psychological problem going on there, but who feel isolated, who feel rejected, who feel not heard. And then we offer this land of them to just go and basically live that world, video games, this, that, and to really celebrate isolation. This culture of young men in our country right now doesn't feel like it's in a very healthy place.
Well, I concur with you. And, from everything I've studied with psychiatry, psychology, criminology, all these years, they will say, the people who know, that by the age of about 5, you've determined your personality. That is how young and that's how early everything is really developed. When you think of that, it is, I think, would be so interesting to really go back in a lot of these individuals' lives and find out from their parents and other people who were around them, what were they really going through during those earliest years. But I think the thing that's so interesting to me is you can take hundreds of thousands of individuals who are bullied, Tony, who have very low self-worth, who are struggling to get around in this world and to make their way in a positive way. And so few, just a microscopic number, become, or minuscule number, become serial killers, for heaven's sakes. So that's what I find very interesting, is how many people perhaps have maybe even similar thoughts, but keep it so dark in the recesses and would never have the courage, if you want to call it that, the gall, the evilness that it would take to do something like this. And Bryan Kohberger, along with many others, right? They crossed that line. They crossed that barrier.
And the thing is with Kohberger, yes, a very few. He is in the extreme minority of whoever crossed the line to be serial killers. But I would say you have a lot of young men who not necessarily become serial killers, but extremely unhealthy individuals who have extremely unhealthy relationships with other people, who go through a life of their own that is unhappy, but end up, if they do get into relationships with others, end up creating very toxic relationships, hurting other people. That those numbers probably are off the charts. We don't even know the numbers to that because we focus solely on the serial killing. But if we could get a little bit more ahead of this psychology in young men and this hatred that many seem to have for women and any sort of opposition to their own ego, their own male, and I hate the term male toxicity, but there's a lot of it when you're a young man, to beat that, to show them another way. But that's a societal change that would need to happen in order to have anything like that taken any sort of mass effect.
Yeah, you bring up such great points. And when you look at many of these school shootings that are taking place right now, oh my gosh, you're seeing a manifestation of serious issues that are now happening, maybe not weekly, but it seems close to weekly that we're discussing a mass shooting.
Yeah.
In our country, whether it's in a place where people are gathered, whether it's in a school, whether it's in a church, it's happening more and more regularly. As somebody who is a Second Amendment right, supporter, I've always argued, and I've been able to show statistics to say, listen, you can't conflate somebody with having a school gun incident because a gun was found in their backpack, say, to somebody shooting up a school, and those numbers were getting all conflated. But now what I'm seeing, especially reporting on this, all the time, it's happening. It is real. And I think that's a manifestation of what you're saying there, where you have these young people who have no way to turn. They're not going to ever be famous. They're not going to be who they want to be. So they become infamous in this dark hole, and they take others down with them. I did want to note too, Bryan Kohberger, from his actions, isn't a serial killer, but many of us believe he would have gone on to kill others, and that psychologically he's a serial killer. I'm in that camp. I've always been in that camp. But I just wanted to point out that, the facts don't show us that, and will never show us this, because he's going to be in prison.
So let's sit with that just for a second. The kid who was bullied, isolated, possibly neurodivergent, likely obsessed with power and control, and completely invisible to the people that were around him. What we just heard from Jennifer is more than just expert commentary. It's a warning shot, because the Bryan Kohberger case doesn't live in a vacuum. It's not some one-off monster who slipped through the cracks. He's the end result of a slow burn failure, societal, institutional, and psychological. And no, not every awkward kid becomes a killer. That's not the point. The point is, when isolation meets resentment, and resentment festers long enough without friction or help or reality checks, you get people like Kohberger. And the horrifying thing is, there are likely more walking around right now. Not all of them will kill, but many will ruin lives in different ways. Toxic relationships, violent outbursts, ideological extremism. And let's be honest, we don't really know how to stop it, do we? A lot of parents out there with kids just like this. Many of those parents may be awkward too. And they may look at their child and go, yeah, they're kind of awkward. They're kind of, like I was. I get it. But then they go worse and more extreme. I would argue, Kohberger's dad felt a little awkward. Not in any way, shape, or form am I saying this man is out to kill or has any sort of inclination to do it. I'm saying more from a social standpoint, more so from a life standpoint. He seemed to be frustrated. He seemed to, struggle in life, the two bankruptcies. In no way am I saying this is a bad guy or anything that is negative about him, but somebody who maybe saw life a little bit differently and had difficulty being a part of it successfully with many other folks. That's my point. And maybe some of that rubbed off into Kohberger, his son, in a very different way. In a way that wasn't just, I struggle, maybe my choices, I look back and maybe aren't the best, but more so, even deeper, an even deeper disconnect. But when you're that parent, especially if you're a parent that's having difficulty even identifying your own choices as maybe not being the best in real time, how are you going to be catching up to your kids who may be worse, who may be more intelligent in many ways, but may have the same sort of deficiencies that you do in terms of social acquiescences? More so, looking at them just hoping that those smarts are going to lead them on a different path. I don't think a lot of parents can even recognize these traits in their own children. And I'm not saying that as a fault or something that, oh, you should be ashamed of. I'm saying they're not capable. It's just kind of how some people are. Not everybody sees things in that way, especially if it's so close to you. Too close to the sun. Too many similarities that if you're having a hard time even recognizing it in yourself, how are you going to see it in anyone else? We like our red flags to come gift wrapped and obvious. We want villains to look like villains. But what Jennifer made clear today is sometimes evil is quiet. It studies criminal psychology. It smiles in seminar rooms. It gets teaching assistant gigs and talks about justice. And then one night it creeps into a house in Moscow, Idaho, and slaughters 4 innocent people. What we didn't get to fully unpack, and maybe we couldn't in one conversation, is how this case reflects a much bigger rot, one that goes beyond Kohberger, beyond incels, beyond any one ideology. The case is about a cultural detachment that breeds disconnection, especially in young men. A system that doesn't teach empathy, but rewards detachment. A society that doesn't intervene until after the blood is on the floor. Jennifer nailed it when she said most people with these dark thoughts never act on them. But the line between thought and action, especially in an echo chamber of rage, can be paper thin. And those chambers are everywhere and calling people like this into them. So where does that leave us? Looking harder, listening closer, and maybe, just maybe, intervening earlier before the next kid who feels invisible decides that infamy is better than being forgotten. That's where we'll leave it for today. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section on YouTube. If you're not already on our YouTube channel, please do check it out. Just search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi on YouTube and you'll find us there. If you're on the podcast platform, please do hit subscribe there. And if you're on the YouTube platform, check us out on the podcast platform. You can get us both ways, video and audio, however you want, and each have their own individual unique pieces associated with them. So if you really want everything, you want to hit subscribe on both platforms. But please do check them both out. The place to comment is on YouTube. So like I said, search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Until next time, for all of us here at True Crime Today in the Hidden Killers podcast, I'm Tony Bruschi. We'll talk again real soon.
Craving non-stop true crime updates? Press subscribe now and get the latest cases, analysis, and expert commentary delivered straight to your feed. Only from the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.